Former Eskom legal head Suzanne Daniels is again testifying at the Commission of Inquiry into State Capture. In September this year, Daniels told the Commission that Gupta associate Salim Essa had offered her 800 million rand to reinstate Eskom's former acting CEO Matshela Koko. Let's cross live to that.
The submission to them.
It was in the afternoon.
So they would have had to consider it overnight.
Yes.
Make a decision.
Yes.
By round robin on a 1.6 billion rand.
Yes, that is correct, Mr. Chairman.
Prepayment.
Yes.
Did any one of them raise concerns?
There were two board members that sent questions, Mr. Chairman.
And who are those?
That was Ms. Varoshni Naidu and Ms. Miriam Kassing.
And what were the concerns?
I think in Ms. Varoshni Naidu's case, she approved the submission. The first line of the email said, "I approve, but please ensure that this goes to the IFC, which is the Investment and Finance Committee. Is it within, make sure that we adhere to the PFMA approvals, and does this need DPE approval, which is the Department of Public Enterprise?" Ms. Kassim had issues, questions were around the financial construction, which I sent to, and the coal pricing, which I then sent to Mr. Koko and Mr. Singh for reply.
Did they reply?
They did reply, and I sent the replies that I received to Ms. Kassim on the morning of the 9th of December.
So, I see that in his affidavit, Mr. Koko says, in regard to the drafting of the no, that's the letter. I think he confirms asking you to draft the letter on the 4th of December 2015. That's the letter you draft, and it goes to the DMR.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. The drafting of the submission itself, you say it's on the 7th. So we were going through the contents of the submission. And what we see on the face of it is the convolution and confusion in regard to the identity of the entity with whom to do this transaction. If you recall, and I would like you to explain this to the chairperson, what was in the mind of, or what was explained to the board when this submission is presented to them? What is explained is the purpose for which this submission was made.
I think the covering note just said this is for the pre-purchase of coal, prepayment of coal, in cash to the amount of 1.68 billion from Optimum to Optimum Coal Mine. And the supporting documents would have been the submission and the letters between Mr. Koko and Dr. Ramotsha.
Yes. Now that explanation, where does one find it? Is it in an email or is it in this submission?
It's in this submission, and
about the prepayment to Tegeta.
No, I think it was prepayment to Optimum Coal Mine that I said, not Tegeta.
To Optimum Coal Mine?
Yes.
You're saying it's in this submission?
Well, it says Optimum Coal Mine.
Yes. Well, there's two things here. I've said the entities are seemingly confused. well, not confused, but it's confusing in regard to the identity of the entities to conclude the transaction with. What I want to understand is your explanation to the chairperson. What was explained to the board is the purpose of the submission. What is the board told? And I appreciate that the board is receiving this. Is it by email?
Yes.
The board is going to decide by way of a round robin, correct?
Yes.
So the board is not going to have a meeting to discuss this documentation submitted before it.
No, not
So
at all.
they're going to individually send you in their approval of this documentation without having sat together to discuss it.
Yes, that is correct.
So what is explained to the board when this document is submitted to it?
This is the submission for decision. It concerns the pre-purchase of coal from Optimum Coal Mine.
So in other words, there is nothing else of any consequence that the board was told other than the contents of the submission.
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, so if anyone wants to know what was the board told, it's what's in the submission.
It was in the documents that I sent
Yeah,
out.
there was no discussion outside of the document.
No.
Okay. Why was it thought necessary to let a matter involving such big amounts, such a big amount, be decided by way of a round robin without the benefit of a proper discussion among board members?
I think, Mr. Chairman, at the time, given the time of year, it was practicality, ostensibly. But there was a rush to get a decision. So the instruction was send out the documents.
And whose instruction was that?
There was a request from the office of Mr. Singh, the Chief Financial Officer, to send it out by round robin. And, that's when I also prepared the documents on that basis. I also sent it out.
Okay. Mr. Silega?
Yeah. Well, what was explained as the reason for the urgency?
There actually was no explanation for the urgency other than there's a threat to security of supply.
Yeah. Was there documentation relied upon to validate that claim of the risk of coal supply?
No, not at the submission.
I see that the only kind of factor relied upon is that OCM has gone into business rescue.
Yes, that is correct.
But does business rescue, a company being in business rescue, prevent it from trading?
No, it does not, and more particularly if you bear in mind that there had been a commitment at the meeting of the 24th of November that the supply would continue.
Yeah. And isn't it that, regarding what I've just asked you, that Tegeta itself was acquiring coal from OCM, or Optimum Coal Mine, in order to supply to Eskom?
Yes, that appeared from the documents, but I didn't have direct knowledge of that at the time.
You
But
didn't
that-
have direct knowledge
yes.
of that?
But that was the contractual arrangement, if you look at the documentation.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is, if Tegeta could buy from this mine, Optimum Coal Mine, no doubt Eskom could continue doing so, directly from the mine.
That is correct. I mean, it had a contract.
So the reason that it was under business rescue was no reason at all for the purposes of this prepayment.
That is correct, Mr. Chairman.
Now give us You know, we have seen, and I want you to just explain to the chairperson, the evolution of this document with the amendments that get to be done to it. Were you aware whether this document went outside of Eskom for commentary by some third party, and that is during the drafting process, and then came back to be finalized with the changes that were made and given to you to submit to the board?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. During the consultation with the Commissioner's investigations team, I was presented with emails between Mr. Eric Wood and the businessman email, and I think it was Mr. Koko and Mr. Singh. My version 2 of the documentation actually went outside of Eskom. It came back signed. Well, when I received it, it was signed. If you look at the discussion that happened between the parties, it was changed from a submission to the Investment and Finance Committee. There was information added, the financial constructions were added, and it then came back to me signed, both by Mr. Koko and Mr. Singh.
Yeah. Chair, if I may, in regard to this particular aspect, I'd like Ms. Suzanne Daniels to turn to page 443. That's where we were relative to the first and the second version of the draft. But now I wanted to do it for a different purpose. 443. Are you there, Ms. Daniels?
Yes, I am there.
Something catches my eye on page 444. I see that, is that what you refer to as your first draft?
Yes, this is the first draft on the 7th of December.
Yes, the heading under executive summary is round robin submission to the Investment and Finance Committee, IFC.
Yes, that is correct.
So why is that? I thought this was a submission to the board.
Mr. Chairman, when I received the instruction, it was my view at the time that the Investment and Finance Committee is a subcommittee of the board which deals with financial matters. And the decision of this nature, I thought should go to the Investment and Finance Committee before it goes to the board. And that is why I started out preparing the document to the Investment and Finance Committee.
Did you do that?
Was that your decision as opposed to an instruction to you from somebody else?
Yes, at that time.
Was it your decision?
Yes.
Had you been instructed as to whom you were supposed to address the submission?
No, not at that stage. I was just given the content. You know, when in Eskom, the term board was used very loosely, you know. So we're going to do a submission to board, and they wouldn't specify in detail. So my assumption in the first instance was that this would go through the Investment and Finance Committee.
Yes, the reference to the board, what do you say about it?
I said you know, in Eskom it was quite a loose term when we had discussions. Like you'd hear, it was decided by the board when it was actually a subcommittee of the board. So when I started out with the draft, I started out on the assumption that it would first go to the Investment and Finance Committee.
Okay. Mr. Salega.
Thank you, Chair. So how did that get to be changed?
When it came back in version, I think it was version 3, it was already the final version. It came back to the board.
Okay, let's see. Version 1 is your page 4 444.
Yes,
Is that correct?
that's correct.
So the email, your email to Mr. Koko is on page 443. So you say to him for your review and sign off, that's Monday 7 December 2015 at 15:16.
Yes, that is correct.
So the document you're sending to him is on page 444.
444.
444.
Oh, there.
So the heading, it reflects to be submitted to the IFC, and it requires on page 447, paragraph 4, other approvals required, Public Finance Management Act, obtained from National Treasury and Department of Public Enterprises, due to tenure and contract value.
Yes, that is correct.
Then on page 448, there's an email again from you to Mr. Matshela Koko. It says version 2, V2.
Yes, that is correct. This is still addressed to the Investment and Finance Committee.
That's at 1558. So you turn the page. The document is still addressed to IFC. And it still has a requirement of Public Finance Management Act on page 452, paragraph 4.
Yes, that is correct.
It's sent off to him, then you turn the page to 453. Again, still on the 7th of December 2015 at 1640. Now please explain to the chairperson, identify to the chairperson what you see there.
It is an email from businessman to Eric Wood, who says, I want the PFMA approval part removed. I also think it should be full board, not IFC, because over 1.5 billion.
What exactly is he saying?
What is...
Well, let's start with this. Has he seen your executive, your summary or your document, the submission?
It appears that version 2 was attached to that email,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman. If you look at what it says in the attachments.
Yes. No, I accept that. I want you to confirm that.
Yes, I confirm.
He has seen that. He has seen it.
Well, I can only confirm from what he...
Yeah, no,
from
I
what he
accept
writes.
that. Based on
what he said,
yes,
he must have
yes.
seen what I'd written.
And is he making submission? Is he making suggestions of what to be removed and what to be amended?
Well, I wouldn't say those are suggestions. I think those are more like instructions.
Yes, but he says he has identified a part that he says should be removed.
Yes.
And he says that it should not be addressed to the Investment and Finance Committee, it should be addressed to the full board.
Yes, that is correct.
Yes. Yes, continue.
Thank you, Chair.
Yes.
Do you know how the draft submission would have blended with Mr. Eric Wood and businessmen?
I only know that from the emails that I've been shown.
You only know from?
From the emails that have been shown by the investigating team.
Yes. My question is, do you know how it would have gone to them, this document?
Okay. It was either forwarded from Mr. Koko or Mr. Singh.
Why do you say that?
The investigator doesn't have an email to that effect.
Well,
that's why I'm asking whether do you know?
Oh, okay. No, yeah. I don't know then how it got to them. But that's my assumption.
So far what we see from the emails is that it is you and Mr. Koko exchanging the draft.
Yes.
So either you or him could have sent it out.
Yes.
Did you send it out?
No, I did not.
Were you aware of this email at the time?
No, I was not aware of the emails at the time.
Okay, so they're wondering, I want to
Is that the businessman email?
Correct, Chairman. Info portal 1.
Or info portal one? Were you not aware of it at that time?
I'm talking about the email exchange, Mr.
Or
Chairman.
about the email address you were?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. When did you become aware of the email exchange
The investigators showed me
of the commission?
Of the commission, and in 2018 as well, Amabungani sent me some questions. I think that was the first time I became aware.
In 2018?
18.
Okay. Mr. Sileka.
Ms. Daniels then, well, on the draft 45, on page 454, I see it still bears IFC. So IFC hasn't been removed. And on page 457, under paragraph 5, it still has the PFMA National Treasury requirement, approval required. So it seems by this time it hasn't come back to you.
No, it doesn't.
Did you in fact do the changes from IFC to board? Did you ultimately do those changes?
No, I did not.
Does your final draft, well, who made the final draft?
The final draft came back signed first from Mr. Koko and then from Mr. Singh.
Signed.
Yes.
Let's see. So that came to you. Turn to page 486.
Yes, I'm there.
Are you there? Yes, please identify the document.
It's an email from Matshela Koko to me.
But this is now on Tuesday, 8 December 2015.
Yes, that is correct.
At 1640.
At 1640, that's correct.
So by this time, this document has not been submitted to the board.
No.
It's forwarding to you the email below.
Yes.
So the email below is also from Mr. Matshela Koko, Tuesday, December 8, 2015 at 3:57 p.m. It's sent to or addressed to Mr. Anand Singh. And the subject is the 2015-1208 double RR Optimum Coal Mine Pty Ltd final. And then he says, boss, please receive the attached signed document. Best regards. At the top, then it gets forwarded to you.
Yes, that is correct.
Is that the document on the next page?
That is the document, yes.
So the last one then is a round-robin submission to Board of Directors.
To the Board of Directors,
No
yes.
longer to IFC.
No longer to IFC, that is correct, Mr. Chair.
And that paragraph 4 of PFMA requirement,
Has now been removed.
and the document is signed by Mr. Koko on 8 December 2015.
Yes.
Is that the document or submission you finally circulated to board members?
Yes.
I see.
Do you know whether Mr. Singh also signed it? I see he didn't sign on this one.
Yes.
Is there another
There's
copy
another-
that is signed?
The next copy is the one that I used because it contained Mr. Singh's signature. If you look at page 492, Mr. Chairman,
Oh, yes.
and then you'll see
I'm
that.
looking at 497.
Yes. That's the document I then used.
Okay.
Yes. So I want to go slightly back, a little back. I see on...
I'm sorry, just for my understanding, what was the ranking between the CFO and group executive generation?
The CFO was the ex officio director on the board, and the chief officer, group executive generation, was a member of the executive committee.
Of the?
Executive committee.
Yes, was the CFO not part of the executive committee?
As well, but in terms of when you think rank, the CFO would rank.
Well, it's confusing me because you have, we looked at an email a few minutes ago where I think Mr. Koko addressed an email here at page 486 to Mr. Singh and addressed him as boss.
Okay.
And now at 497, Mr. Koko appears to be the last one to sign in terms of what I take it to be hierarchy.
Yes. I think, just to put it in context, Mr. Chairman, at this point in time, Mr. Singh was acting Chief Executive Officer.
That Mr. Koko?
Mr. Singh, because Matshela Koko is writing to Anush Singh and calling him boss.
You say Mr. Singh was acting as group CEO?
Mr. Molefe was off sick at that time.
Yes, but on this document, he didn't sign in that capacity at
No.
497.
He signed as Chief Financial Officer.
Yes.
Yes.
But as Chief Financial Officer, when you compare to Group Executive Generation, that's what I'm asking, what's the hierarchy between the two of them?
There would have been a hierarchy. The Chief Financial Officer is actually a bit higher than the Group Executive Generation.
Yeah, well, it doesn't make the sense that one has got over the time. One has seen that usually the highest ranking official would be the last to sign after everybody has made recommendations, and then the highest ranking official then makes the decision.
Yes.
Whereas here, you have the Chief Financial Officer before Mr. Koko. Okay, so I guess there's nothing you can say about it.
Well, at this stage, I think if you just look at the emails, Mr. Koko signed first. If you look at the emails in terms of the time, Mr. Koko signed the document first.
Were they on the same level? Were they not on the same level? Or is that something you wouldn't know?
It's
the
difficult.
Chief Financial Officer and Group Executive Generation? Or was one of them higher than the other in terms of the company hierarchy?
In terms of the company hierarchy, the Chief Financial Officer would be higher, slightly higher than the Group Executive Generation.
Okay, all right. Mr. Silaga.
Thank you. Yeah, Ms. Daniels, because even the draft is in that order. Mr. Singh is first, and then Mr. Matshela Koko is last, which is what the chairperson is saying. Normally, the junior people will sign first and pass it on to the most senior person, who will be the last to sign. After the document is submitted to him and it's explained, this is what it means, and he's satisfied, then he signs. That's the point being made with you. But you would have known who is more senior than the other, surely? Mr. Arnold Singh, as the Chief Financial Officer, would have been more senior.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
And so we come out of the state capture inquiry where Suzanne Daniels continues to give her testimony. That's all from the On Point team. We'll have more news for you, of course, tomorrow. SA Today coming up at the top of the hour. Have a pleasant one.